Hey everyone, Lux here again, and today, as we wait for more reveal info on the next big Path of Exile 2 update, The Last of the Druids set to drop on December 12th, I am still torturing myself with this challenging hardcore solo self-found playthrough of the campaign, where I am only using the shield bash from blocking attacks with raised shield. Each episode is going to go over the respective act and how the experience went. If I survived or not, I won't spoil that for you, but seeing as this is episode 2, we're going to go over Act 2 and how I progressed through this one. If you missed episode 1 going over my Act 1 experience, it'll be linked here in the top right corner of this video as I am speaking to you right now, as well as in the description box. I offer a bit more explanation on the run and the rules, but just to quickly go over them again in case you are just joining us. The first rule is I cannot use any other skill gem or ability other than raise shield, and 2, I cannot trade, which I mean is a bit of a given since I'm in a solo self-found league, but I think it's important to mention since I think the run would be too easy if I could just, trade for a good shield at any time. Anyways, let's get into the video. I gotta say, Act 2 was substantially easier in a lot of ways, but also really difficult in others. I had some pretty close calls, man. Some a little too close. Alright, so again, I'm going to break this video up into 2 parts, how progressing through the act went overall in the first one, and specifically how each boss fight went as I fought them in the second. Though, since this is Act 2, I'll quickly talk about how the trial of Sekhemas went as well. That was kind of a tough one with this build, but that's enough of an explanation. Let's get started. So if you've watched episode 1, you likely remember that I found the support gems most useful for progressing and clearing through the zones were Pin 1, since you can avoid heavy stun buildup and heavy stunning mobs all the time can slow you down, and Bleed purely for the damage. However, I found myself actually using Brutality and Brutality 2 instead once I found the tier 2 support gem for it instead of Pin 1 in this act, since the bleed damage was starting to become more significant and I wanted to boost that up as much as possible. Pin 2 is also a support gem I want to play around with more. Seems like it could be good both to avoid heavy stun and have higher crit chance, but overall it still felt slower than the tried and true Brutality and Bleed combo. I even tried some Poison and Bursting Plague shenanigans early in the act, but once again I just didn't find it to be as effective as the other combo. And I can't run Herald of Blood in this challenge run, so Brutality and Bleed are the 2 support gems I ended up sticking with in the vast majority of this act, including boss fights. But yeah, overall progress was pretty smooth, I gotta say, save for a few close calls and some risky situations I should have been more careful in. Clearing was pretty standard early on. Tried to craft a better shield right after the first zone and failed miserably once again, but I think sometime after Mod and Quarry, I think it was actually right after the Rudja boss fight, I spent some of my excess gold gambling and got a very good upgrade of a shield that I couldn't use yet. I think I was just a couple of levels too low, so I stored it for a minute, but once I was able to use it, the difference was huge, man. I was able to equip it while clearing the Traitor's Passage. It was a level 21 shield, and it was shortly after the Balbala fight that I threw it on. Would have loved it for that fight, but we'll talk about how that all went in the next section of the video. But yeah, the new shield actually let me kill weaker normal mobs in 1 hit, assuming the bleed procced, which is just such a nice quality of life upgrade, I guess I'd call it. I threw an Iron Rune and some armor scraps to make it even better, and I basically went from a 93 armor shield to a 192 one, which resulted in raised shield's listed DPS going from 97 to 194. Huge upgrade. Even if the damage is still overall pretty pitiful, for this challenge run I love to see it. It made clearing the subsequent zones so much speedier, though funny note in the Mastodon Badlands, those stupid rib rattle enemies that walk around and buff other monsters don't actually have any attacks to hit you with, so you cannot kill them without the help of another mob hitting you. So at times I'd often just leave a bunch of these guys behind as I progress through the area, or I would try to prioritize killing them first in a fight with some other monsters hitting me. Honestly, overall the clearing was pretty easy though. After the Mastodon Badlands, I hit up the Lost City and it was pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy here. It's nice that you can block all of those little shock scarab novas for more bashes, and clearing out the armies of terracotta troops was really fun. Valley of the Titans was also pretty smooth, though you have to make sure to target those damn liches first with this low damage build, or else they just keep resurrecting those giant skeletons. Oh, and as a quick note, the Abyss Fissures portion of each zone was obviously a little more difficult than the rest of the zone, truth be told, but I made sure to clear each one. The rares that popped out sometimes felt like mini bosses that took a while to take down, but I wanted to make sure I got as much loot as possible since this is solo self-found. And I got a bit of a bigger payoff doing this in the Valley of the Titans, since one of the Abyssal Armory troves dropped a new unique helmet for me. I was relying on the Greymake helm this whole time from Act 1, but this helmet ended up being Arian's Cobble, which rolled pretty well to be honest, and was an overall upgrade at this point since Greymake's stat bonuses decrease the higher level you are, so pretty much immediately slapped this new one on. Deathlord was fine, though I noticed I had to pay a little closer attention to my stun threshold again since things were hitting harder, so grabbing some stun threshold somewhere is going to be higher on the list of priorities in my gear and passive skill tree, and in this zone in particular, I just had to watch out for the gas zombies, because if you're not paying attention, those things can drain your health pretty quickly, and you obviously can't block that effect. Path of Mourning was also fine. Spires of Deathlord was honestly great. I felt like I got a ton of experience here after hitting that lightning resistance shrine early on, which activates all those extra mobs in each tower, and the clearing, again, for this build specifically, felt pretty good at this point. I felt safe enough to sit in dense crowds of monsters and just hit them all with shield bashes, while hopefully tagging them all with a bleed. Alright, last thing I'll go over in this part of the video is the Trial of Sekhemas. I felt pretty confident going in, but quickly realized how risky the trial was going to be with this build since, well, my only means of attack means I have to get hit. A lot. And with how the honor system works in this trial, you don't want to get hit, you know, at all. So this made for a very precise, very careful run, but it overall wasn't too bad, and it didn't take too long. I think around 23 minutes overall, and yes, I was able to successfully clear it on my first try with some smart choices, but also a little luck on my end. Like, I didn't have to deal with any ritual trials, and I could picture that being tougher to deal with since the lich summoners you have to kill don't actually attack, so you'd have to pull mobs near them and bash them down. I was also around level 30 or 31 when I ran this, truth be told, and this was the Barya token that was given as a quest item from Balbala, so this zone was level 22, and obviously that advantage also helped out greatly. But yeah, again, pretty easy overall, was careful enough, got tagged a few times by mobs, but using active block is pretty strong in this trial, to be honest, as you can block pretty much all traps as long as you are facing the right way, and most monsters have highly telegraphed, slower versions of attacks compared to their overworld versions. I think the only annoying mob in this run were those serpent people. They have some very strange attacks that are kind of tough to block, honestly, and the projectile from the caster will just hit you while you are blocking if you aren't facing it. I'm not even sure that attack can be blocked, to be honest. Eventually made it to Rattlecage and got my Ascendancy, rolled with Titan just because it seems like the safest, most straightforward Ascendancy for both boosting my damage and tankiness with hulking form later on. I know Warbringer with the armor break might have been a smart option for damage, as well as the Smith of Katava for hardcore league survivability, but what can I say? I just like the Titan. This was towards the end of the act, and I wanted to grab my Ascendancy before facing off with Jamanra, who I was honestly quite intimidated by. He has a lot of health, and I pictured that fight being the toughest of this act by a long shot, either by his kinda scary moveset or the pure duration of the fight, sapping my health flask charges. So how did that fight go, you might ask? We'll talk about it in this next section alongside all the other bosses. Alright, like last time, I'm going to start from the top and go over each boss in the order that I fought them, how each fight went, how their movesets were great or terrible for triggering shield bashes, also if there were any blockable red animation attacks, and of course how long each fight took. There were some marathons in this one, none quite toppling the King of the Mist fight in Act 1. But there was a close one. Again, I recommend watching episode 1 if you haven't, because there's some interesting information on certain red animation attacks from bosses since they are supposed to be unblockable, but as I found out, you can actually block portions of these attacks, and in some cases you can just straight up block the entire attack. But that's about it. Let's get started. First up is Rathbreaker. Overall, this fight was on the easier side, I gotta say. He kept using this pretty standard swing to try and hit me with, which was an easy way to trigger my shield bash, and honestly didn't have a ton of crazy stun buildup. The first phase was pretty straightforward. When he starts summoning his hyena boys, I had to worry a little more about the stun buildup at certain points, but again, was overall pretty manageable. I just had to make sure to clear out the ads and use their attacks for extra shield bashes on the boss where I could. Rathbreaker has one red animation attack, which is the triple swing combo where he drags his sword along the ground and shoots out two like wind slashes before a big overhead slam. He pretty much never got this move off though, because the first two swings are blockable, and I just shield bashed and mini stunned him every time he was performing it. There is one other move that's a little weird to me since it's not a red animation move, but later in the fight he starts using this overhead slam, which should be blockable, but doesn't seem to be. I got hit every time I tried to block it, so I had to be careful and just avoid it once I realized this. Yep, standard stuff for the most part. Took 4 minutes and 21 seconds to take down. Not too long, but also not too short, at least for this run. Next up is Rudja, the Dread Engineer. At least I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. She has a mix of grenade and flamethrower attacks, the vast majority of which are blockable, even the initial throw on the grenade, so that's good for this run. The one standard attack I had to watch out for was the gas grenade. I didn't want to stand too long in any of those gas clouds. But yeah, being able to interrupt and take advantage of everything, including her flamethrower attacks, made this a pretty easy fight. She has one red animation attack, which I am sure you are familiar with. She primes a grenade to explode and sticks it at the end of her weapon, which she starts flailing around like crazy. If you get hit by this, you take a bunch of damage, and I think you get stunned maybe? I can't remember the last part to be honest, but you definitely get hit very hard with this ability. Thankfully, all you have to do is sprint now to outrun it, and she spends all of her time chasing you until she blows herself up after 3 back and forth swings. So honestly, not too hard to avoid. I just started sprinting in a circle around the room as soon as she ran at me with it. A little lengthier than the first fight at 6 minutes and 24 seconds, but not too bad. It's mostly just the running around while she chases you that adds so much time. So kinda understandable that it took a while, even though our damage was relatively alright. Balbala the Traitor is next. So this fight was a little weirder than the other two. Balbala just loves to jump around while doing things and has a bunch of weird attacks that are blockable, but sometimes you can't take advantage of the shield bash based on her positioning. Thankfully, she does summon quite a few adds throughout the course of the fight that just use standard attacks, so those were a welcome sight to help get those extra shield bashes. I basically just shield bashed off of her standard dagger slashes, but it felt kind of like I should just use whatever I could get in the moment during this fight. It didn't feel super consistent compared to the other two. She has one red animation attack, and boy, I might be salty about this one, but I don't think it should be a red animation attack. It's this super fast teleport into ground slam that is honestly very hard to avoid, especially if you're a first timer. Like, I don't think any red animation attack should be that fast. Even after I got good at dodging it, it just doesn't seem like red animation attacks are ever this quick. Didn't really like when I got tagged by this one a few times during the fight, and I tried blocking it just to experiment, but it is not blockable. Yeah, I think out of all of the fights so far in this act, this one I actually felt a little annoyed by. I didn't have as much fun in this one compared to some of the others, even if it did take only 5 minutes and 13 seconds. Yeah, I think maybe change that red animation attack to be a little slower, or maybe make some other move of hers unblockable. That one just feels a little too fast to be an unblockable. Alright, next up, Jamanra the Risen King. I expected this fight to be potentially a little scary, but it wasn't even a little scary. This was actually pretty easy overall. He has some standard sword slashes that are pretty easy to block and get some bashes off of, but he has this triple slash combo he loved to perform, and it was very easy to also trigger shield bashes off of this. You just had to make sure you aim the right direction and hit him with it, since he's kinda zooming during this attack. I think he may also have a beam move, the one that I blocked at the very beginning of this fight, but I don't think he ever used that one again as I was fighting him this run. He has one red animation attack, which is where he throws his sword into the ground. This part of the attack is something you want to avoid and is unblockable, and then he winds up an explosion that occurs around the sword that hits the whole arena, the sword in the ground now serving as the safe spot for the second part of the attack. No part of this red attack was blockable, so just had to avoid it every time. But yeah, overall pretty standard stuff to be honest. He summons that sandstorm and those scarabs before he heads out, but again, that's just fighting some mobs. Overall, very easy fight. This took about 3 minutes and 52 seconds, shortest one of the bunch so far, but kinda understandable as this doesn't feel like a fully fledged boss fight anyway, since he just dips out at a certain point. Alright, fun one next, the Ekbab, Ancient Steed, and Ikbab, the Deathlord duo boss fight. I thought this could potentially be a tough one and get kinda hectic when they are both up at the same time, and it kind of was, but most of the stuff that is happening in this first phase of the fight is blockable, so as crazy as things looked on the screen, it actually wasn't too bad, though I would say that it is a bit harder than some of the previous fights because the big guy has some pretty heavy-hitting attacks that build up your stun bar if you're not paying attention, so I definitely had to chill out once or twice to empty it, but yeah, other than that, as long as you are positioning yourself so you only have to face one direction for all the stuff that's going on between these two, you are golden. 2 red animation attacks to keep in mind here. One is from the caster Ikbab. He'll basically mark the ground with a bunch of bright runes and then make meteors crash down on where those runes are shortly after. I don't think this is blockable, but truth be told, I didn't try. Second is from Ekbab, the big boy. It's basically just a charge he uses to trample the ground and catch up with you in the process if you move too far away. Strangely enough, there is a portion of this attack that is blockable. I'm not sure if it's the stomp or the shockwave, but I was able to trigger some shield bashes off of it when I noticed that it is blockable to some extent. This was honestly a pretty fun fight. Took about 4 minutes and 25 seconds overall. on the shorter side, which is welcome. And I think a big part of that speediness for this fight, and even the previous one, was that shield upgrade that happened during the Traitor's passage, and also hitting both targets at the same time during this boss fight as much as I could. Next up, Kabala Constrictor Queen. Not usually a tough fight, but for this particular build, this took forever, and it's all because of this bone shield mechanic she has. It looks like it absorbs a set amount of damage as well as having a set duration, because this is a fairly low damage build, and trying to break through that bone shield was excruciating. I would watch helplessly as her energy shield would regen as I am bashing her with this bone shield up. I was like, come on, I'm doing damage, come on, but alas, yeah, that bone shield is what made this fight take so long. She summons some adds which are helpful in triggering more shield bashes, so that was nice at least. But again, her bone shield would just absorb so much of that advantage at times. And she also has this red Nova attack, which is blockable, but you still get a pretty nasty armor debuff from it. So to play it safe, I chose to avoid it. She technically has one red animation attack where she whips a bunch of those wind projectiles around and makes them explode. But I think you can block those, although it was kind of hard to test because it wasn't really advantageous since the positioning was usually a little weird. You know, I didn't want to run too far from the boss to try and block one of those explosions if I wasn't going to be close enough to hit her with the shield bash after. Aside from that, a bunch of standard swings to take advantage of when she'd use them, but it was mostly those and the adds that were most important to use for the shield bashes. Despite that, the bone shields made this boss take 10 minutes and 23 seconds. Definitely on the longer side for no good reason, but I mean, you know, I'm using shield bash only for a hardcore solo self-found run. That's not really the way this game is intended to be played, so honestly, that's just probably on me. Azarian, the Forsaken Sun. Alright, listen, I'm going to keep this as short as I can. This boss usually isn't a big deal, but man, I have a lot to say about how this fight went on this run, particularly about his collision boxes, which almost screwed me over and ended the run. Almost. Also, as a funny aside, I was actually worried that I wouldn't be able to start the fight because I usually get some free hits in during this conversation he's having with the water goddess, and obviously I need the boss to hit me first before I can attack here. But thankfully the fight starts automatically once the dialogue ends. You just have to, you know, listen to the whole thing. So first off, he has this standard vertical war pick swing that is very blockable, but it shifts your character's position if you are standing right in front of him. Like it teleports you a short distance back, and it's a bit of a toss-up if you can get the shield bash off or not, since there is this the target in range auto detection before you can bash. Felt super awkward at first, but was able to get these bashes off consistently once I figured out that I should just take a couple of steps forward after each swing so that I am in the auto detect range for the shield bash. Next, he has this move where he whirls his war picks around before clanging them together to send out a fiery shockwave. And yeah, this was totally blockable and pretty easy to get shield bashes off of. The other one was this overhead swing that sends out kind of another fiery shockwave on the ground in a shorter range, kind of like a cone-shaped deal. This was a weird one because I would not block this attack if I was close, but I would block this attack if I was further away from Azarian. Yeah, hard to get bashes off of this one because the hitbox was just kind of jank with this move. And lastly, his red animation attack. This is not blockable, I tried, but he basically just twirls around while charging forward and performs multiple swings while doing so, all of them hitting moderately hard, so you don't want to get hit by all of them. However, and this happened twice in this fight, there is a weird unintentional vacuum-like effect on this move if your character gets caught in the wrong part of the attack. Again, I don't think this is intentional because it like instantly teleports your character back into him without any animation, and you just get hit with all of the swings, man. It really did a ton of damage to me, and it was difficult for what I felt were the wrong reasons. Yeah, that might be a server latency issue or something, but that was the one move that annoyed me a bit here and felt like a potential run ender. Thankfully though, I did not die, and the total fight time was 5 minutes and 54 seconds, not including the dialogue, which honestly is not too bad of a time. It was just the hitbox and collision box jankiness that made it feel a bit more tedious than some of the other fights here. Okay guys, Zalmarath the Colossus. So I guess I'll start by saying that once again, you are clearly not meant to play through this game using shield bash only, and no boss in this act made it more obvious than this one. He actually has quite a few blockable attacks, but man, they are either never near enough to the boss to actually get a shield bash off of, or they are kind of inconsistent with their triggers. This was a mess of a fight, to be honest, and took so long that I honestly thought I might fail from pure duration. Like, neither of his arm sweeps could be taken advantage of since his arms aren't considered a real target for the auto detect on the shield bash. You have to be at the boss's torso. Also, many of his sword swings were hard to time or were just seemingly straight up unblockable. He has this weird delay on this fiery hand palm move that does have a blockable portion, but it's kind of hard to time without taking damage. His rapid eye lightning projectile spam isn't a red animation attack, yet none of them are blockable. There's just so much that was tough with this one, guys. But thankfully, his triple sword stab into the ground right in front of him was a fairly consistent way to get shield bashes off, so I made sure to take advantage of that every chance that I could. His I-beam attacks were also pretty easy to block, especially later on when he starts using that big wind-up beam that hits the whole arena. Honestly, it doesn't even do that much stun buildup, and I can get like 2 to 3 bashes off of it if I was quick, so love to see that one. What also helped the fight speed up a bit was later on when the ads showed up and started trying to blow me up. Thankfully, all of those attacks are blockable, and I was able to bash Zalmarath at a more normal pace, I'd call it, though those self-destruct explosions could actually hit pretty hard, and I had a very close call during this fight. He has one boring red animation attack. He just lifts his fist up and slams it down where you are if you are near to him, and it's unblockable. There you go. I kid you not. This fight took 21 minutes and 58 seconds, guys. Not quite as bad as King in the Mist in the first act, but I gotta say, it's damn close, and it was excruciating until he started using his big eye laser move more and the ads started piling on. A real test of patience, this fight. After that, another big boy, Tor Gul the Defiler. This was a lengthy fight as well, but not as much as the last one, thank God. I actually had a lot more fun in this fight over the course of its duration. Felt like I had to focus up a bit, but nothing felt too overly janky. Just some weirdness with its big arms and elbows in the arena sometimes, but it had a variety of moves that were honestly fun to play around with this build. It has a big, pretty slow overhead slam that it performs with one hand, which has some moderate stun buildup, but was a consistent attack to bash off of. However, the move I had the most success with was its like puking up ability. You actually don't want to be in the puke because, well, one, it's disgusting, but two, it actually doesn't have a hit portion to the attack and it deals a lot of damage over time. Really what made this move so good for this build was the skeletons it summoned while using this attack, and those guys just have super basic moves, so it let me shield bash more. Some other good moves to block was the move where it casts a bunch of runes on the ground before exploding one. This one actually has crazy stun buildup, but you want to take advantage of every shield bash trigger you can here, so it was worth it. Another move where it starts kind of rampaging and hitting a bunch of different spots with its various limbs. Another good one to block, although positioning can be kind of tough on that one. And in phase 2, one of the best ones was when it would shoot a bunch of fire projectiles out of its chest, which would then summon a bunch of those fiery skull mobs for you to bash off of as well. Loved seeing this move towards the end of the fight. Anyways, 2 red animation attacks and I guess 1 unblockable attack, I'd call it. Yeah, the first red attack is just a big head slam into the ground after a big wind-up. Didn't want to try blocking that, so I just rolled away from it. Second red attack is where it like sticks its hands into the ground, then swipes in a big semicircle in front of it. And this move actually kills its own skeletons, I think, so I did not like that part at all. And the last unblockable attack is its fire breath that it uses frequently in the fight. It's unblockable because I am pretty sure that it's not a hit attack. I could be wrong here, but when I tried blocking it, I just got ignited every time, so I stopped trying pretty quickly since that ignite really hurt. Anyways, longer fight at 13 minutes and 28 seconds, but to be totally honest, I kind of had fun with this one. Didn't feel too dangerous either, pretty easy overall as long as you were paying attention. Alright, next is Rattlecage the Earthbreaker. Even with the honor system, you guys, I think this fight was a breeze, to be honest. I don't think this guy has a single red animation attack, and I'm pretty sure everything is blockable, so I just took advantage of his whole moveset, to be honest. One interesting note, his most intimidating attack is obviously the explosion where he lights himself up and blows up 3 times, but I kid you not, every part of this attack is blockable. And it doesn't get mini-stunned while channeling it, which I'm not sure is correct or not, but I was cool with it because it just let me have 3 free shield bashes every time. Obviously, I wanted this fight to end sooner rather than later since projectiles start popping up all over the place, all of which you can get bashes off of, but I mean, there are so many at some point that you're likely going to get tagged in the back or something every now and then. Overall, very easy fight. Took a quick 2 minutes and 24 seconds to take down without visiting the merchant or anything that run, though do keep in mind that I did run this at level 31, and this was the quest level barrio you get from Balbala, which is a level 22 trial. And lastly, we have Jamanra, the Abomination. I already expressed my fear for this fight since this guy has a lot of health and a pretty scary moveset, especially in phase 2. But guys, I'll be honest, this was one of the easier fights this run, no joke. Honestly easier than Geonor in Act 1. So basically, if you're up in Jamanra's face like I had to be with my build, he just kinda wants to hit you with this basic ass lightning swing that is blockable, has barely any stun buildup, and is just so easy to bash off of. This is what let me do the vast majority of my damage in phase 1. He has a couple of other moves up his sleeve, obviously. I mean, he'll send those little spires out to do lightning shenanigans, and that red animation explosion attack in front of him. Yeah, I just avoided that one and ran behind him every time. But literally everything else is blockable. It was honestly just a super straightforward bash fest for the first phase, aside from that little storm sequence I had to deal with one time, which was a little more challenging since those mobs deal some decent stun buildup, but once it was over, it was back to bashing the lightning swings as usual. So phase 2, he has a couple of red animation attacks that I'll just talk about real quick. I am pretty sure they are both true unblockables from what I tested, but yeah, he has one where he conjures a big two-handed sword to hit with an overhead swing and sends out a small shockwave, but yeah, just had to roll sideways and avoid this one. Just be mindful of the timing because it has pretty good tracking. The other is when he conjures the pole arm and does a big semicircle sweep towards his front. Timing is honestly similar to the other one, but you just want to ideally roll to the boss's right since he swings left, and you potentially roll along with the attack if you roll to his left and can get tagged. Alright, so let me tell you about the funniest bit during this part of the fight. At some point he summons two little spires that just continuously electrocute the line between them, but this is blockable, guys, and it doesn't have a lot of stun buildup. This was hilarious because it let me literally spam shield bash to my heart's content once I picked up on this, and Jamanra could not perform any of his moves while I was just stun locking him. This honestly took up a big portion of the second phase, just spamming shield bash from these lightning spires. He also summons those portals that just continuously shoot those daggers, and that was another move you could bash spam off of. The poor guy just could not do much in the second phase because he was getting mini-stunned to death, literally. It was honestly a super funny interaction that trivialized this part of the fight. He has some other blockable attacks, but really it was these two alongside some of the standard lightning and sand swings he performs that let me take him down without a problem. Fight took about 10 minutes and 36 seconds, a little longer, but not as long as some of the other fights in this act, and honestly, I was just cracking up for all of phase 2, so that definitely made things feel a bit faster. So yeah guys, here I am in Act 3. Haven't died yet, but we'll see what this one brings. I didn't go over much of the passive skill tree this time around, but I'll include a PoE2 ninja link to this character in the description box of this video if you are interested. Basically, I'm just leaning into bleed and area of effect nodes to help with clearing and damage, something this build severely lacks. Big surprise, right? But that's going to be it for this one. I am so hyped for the last of the Druids update. I honestly cannot wait to see what GGG reveals here soon, so keep an eye out for any commentary on that. But until then, I'm going to keep torturing myself with this meme of a run, so I'll see you guys next time.